All right. Our next two speakers, one is, and I got to put my goggles on because I can't see anything. One is Jennifer Mylar, and she is a graduate of Boston University, Sargent College, the School of Allied Health Professionals. Jen has been a member of the Johns Hopkins Ataxia Center team since its inception for the past 10 years. She has presented the National Ataxia Foundation lectures at the local, state, and national level on the topic of the benefits of exercise and safe mobility strategies. In addition to providing clinical care, Jen works as a research physical therapist with Johns Hopkins Laboratory of Vestibular Neuroadaptation. Jen, I welcome you up to the stage. And then also joining is another Jennifer Keller, and she is a research physical therapist at the Kennedy Krieger Institute. Jen has conducted research in the Center for Movement Studies under the guidance of Dr. Bastian for over 15 years. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you to everyone in the audience here, and thank you to the National Ataxia Foundation for inviting us. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here to speak to you about a topic that we are both very passionate about. My name is Jennifer Miller.
And I'm Jennifer Keller. It makes it easy when there's two Jens. You just helps you make your, remember your, who you want to ask a question of.
Exactly. So we have nothing to disclose. We just put some familiar slides of the Philadelphia area here just for your, just for fun. But at the clinical investigators meeting, we learned of an exceeding number of pharmacological therapy trials, which is very exciting. Despite the advances in research and effective medical therapies are still emerging. So rehabilitation, physical therapy, and exercise remains a primary means of maintaining and improving function in people living with ataxia. So everyone in this room shares the common goal of maximizing quality of life, your ability to care for yourself, your ability to care for others, and contribute to society. And everyone in this room it's also heard of the importance of exercise for health maintenance, especially if you've attended these meetings over the years. A recent systematic review revealed rehabilitation interventions and subsequent outcomes in individuals with degenerative ataxia were evaluated. There was no consensus as to the optimal duration, frequency, intensity, or type of exercise. More research is needed in this area, but what the study revealed was there is consistent evidence that exercise improves function, balance, and the neurological ataxia rating scores. So key types of exercises that were identified in these studies that were consistently seen over and over were balance training was very helpful, bicycling, treadmill training, and multidisciplinary inpatient rehabilitation. So we're going to review some of the key take-home points from various exercise studies later in this talk. So what are some things that keep you from exercising? Some say the hardest part of exercising is starting. So why is that? Some people could say motivation, time, safety, pain. So these barriers can be true for everyone, and surely there's other barriers that you could add to this list. This is just a starting point for our talk today. And where is a good place to start to exercise? Home is a good place if you've identified a safe place, such as standing in the corner of a room or on a recumbent stationary bike or on the floor. In a gym, spending money on a gym membership or signing up for a group exercise class can certainly be an incentive. Pool exercise offers a safe opportunity to work on balance, walking endurance without fearing the consequence of a fall. And a PT clinic is a good place to start to establish an appropriate home program for you. And a PT can help identify potential barriers to be successful at maintaining a home program and help you problem solve to establish a program that's effective but also safe. We don't want people to be setting themselves up for disaster. Let me get back up. And the American Physical Therapy Association website has a link locating PTs in your area. And if you go to that link, you can type your zip code and specify neurological specialty. A PT that you might identify might not have experience in treating people with ataxia on a regular basis, but a neurospecialist would know where to find the available resource to provide appropriate care. So we're going to just try to make this talk fun, a little more of an interactive section with a little game here. So hopefully everyone here is ready to test their knowledge with the familiar game of Jeopardy.
We have five different categories. If we don't get through all of the things today, you have all the information in the handouts, but try not to cheat and look ahead at the answers to the questions. We're gonna, just because it's a big group, instead of having a couple of contestants, we're gonna just choose for you to start, and you can take some time and think about what you think the question is to each of our clues. For barriers, we have information on what might be types of barriers, in particular to people who are living with ataxia, as well as some strategies to address those. We have a category on technology and how it might be useful to make everyday living easier. We have facts about ataxia and how that relates to barriers and exercise. As well as results from recent exercise studies and what's out in the literature. And finally, safety, a key thing for making your exercise program successful. So maybe, Alex, we can start with barriers for 200. Thanks. So some say that this is the hardest part about starting exercising. Do you have any ideas?
Okay, so anybody have any ideas? Right.
Yes, that's it.
That is right.
So
what is answer? We'll click on the answer, Alex. What is getting started? Yeah, motivation can definitely be the hardest part about exercising, among the other things. Okay, we'll take barriers for 400. Alex?
Thanks. So if you set personal goals and do this, you are more likely to stick with your exercise program. Any thoughts? Yes? Having a buddy. Great. Yeah. Tracking your progress. Very good. So our answer is communicate your goals to others. My example would be every New Year's, my husband tells me that how many miles he wants to ride his bicycle. And so I think that helps him get to that goal, because that way I'm not worried in December that he's trying to ride his bike in the snow to reach his total mileage.
And just one more thing about that is when you do set goals or talk about goals, you want to make sure those goals are realistic and safe. You have to be mentally okay with modifying your expectations. So if you're, and other answers could be spending money on the gym membership or the personal trainer or signing up for an event. That's another.
I liked Kyle's comment about it being kind of a curve, and your plan to try and stay at the top of the curve. And the curve might shift somewhere along that, along the line of, what you can do, but to try and maintain that at the highest level, I think that's an excellent perspective. So, all right, we'll go back to barriers for 600. Difficulty walking due to ataxia leads to this barrier. Can anyone think of an idea?
Yep.
Fear of falling. That's it. Fear of falling. So fear of falling is a huge predictor, actually, of even falling more. So it's something that we, especially as physical therapists, take seriously and want to make sure that you're safe and can perform any exercise or activity without risking falling, because that also prevents you from having a chance to learn how to do something better and with better balance and less risk. So.
Barriers for 800.
Barriers for 800? That would be great, thanks. Exercising while living with ataxia is a test of one's frustration tolerance. Anybody have an idea what the question is? All right, our answer is that it can take longer to see improvements when you're trying to exercise when you have ataxia. So it might actually mean that you have to exercise longer and before you're going to see some improvement, which really means that you need to not try and avoid becoming frustrated early on, because you're going to need to stick with it a little bit longer. I'm sure everyone can tell me here, can attest to that. But in particular, you can see that exercise studies are not short duration studies. They tend to go on for a longer period of time to see change. And I think I'm on a tangent, but I know people are interested about how you continue to get therapy services for a longer period of time, and I think that's one thing that needs to be addressed when, trying to advocate for more therapy services, is that it may take a little bit longer and a little bit more intense intervention before they're going to see a positive change, and so that might be a powerful thing to use in your defense if you are in need of further services and have to argue for that. All right.
For 200.
We're going to move on to exercise for 200. Stationary biking can improve leg coordination and the ICARS, which is the neurological rating score. True or false?
Yep. Yeah. The answer is true. There was a study done by Chang and colleagues in Taiwan recently, and they evaluated the effectiveness of stationary biking over a 4-week period and looked at outcomes such as functional coordination in people living with spinocerebellar ataxia. So specifically, they looked at a physiological level of the timing of the shin versus the calf muscles with biking, which is needed for walking also. And the participants in the study biked for 15 minutes, 3 times per week for 4 weeks. And they found that, yes, the timing and coordination of recruitment of those calf versus shin muscles, otherwise known as reciprocal inhibition, improved, and their clinical neurological or ICARS score also significantly improved. So the take-home message from this study is, and it was mentioned at the panel, the recumbent bike or a trike bike, if you're interested in riding outdoors safely, or indoor stationary biking can be effective. And I know there's several, Mike Hammer and Gregory are people at this conference who are very passionate about biking. It would be fun to talk to them if you're interested.
I think just to add one more thing, living with ataxia, all of your movements take a lot more effort and a lot more energy, and so it's important to try and do some exercise that focuses on your endurance level, because you just need to be that much more fit than anyone else in order to be able to manage your symptoms throughout the day. So.
Okay, Alex will take exercise for 400, please.
These types of exercise improve walking. Balance, that's it. So what are balance exercises? In the lab that I'm a part of, they have done a study where they looked at people's ability to maintain their balance, or how imbalanced they were, and compared it to their ability to be accurate with placing their foot to a target. And they compared those things to how fast they walk. And fast walking is considered usually a measure of quality of life. The faster you walk, the better that your quality of life is often associated. And so what they found was actually that it was balance. It was not how uncoordinated your leg movements were, but how well you were able to balance that impacted how fast you were able to walk. And so that's why I think a number of studies have focused on balance exercises, in particular to improve walking for people with ataxia. So.
Okay, we'll take exercise for 600, please. Keller?
Children with ataxia can improve coordination through exercise. So, true or false? True. Our answer is true, and we're going to go to tell you a little bit more about a study. If you'll go to the video study link, thanks.
So we're highlighting this study because it could be potentially something that you could do at home safely, initially under the guidance of a PT, but there's not a lot of studies out there for kids living with ataxia, so this was done by the IL group in Germany, but the results applies to adults also. So the issue is, kids with early onset ataxia, some of the balance exercises that we give adults standing in the corner of a room could be exceedingly boring. So how are we going to incentivize kids to exercise and want to sustain a program to have long-term results? So this group recruited 10 kids with all different types of early onset ataxia. They had no other neuro condition, and they were able to walk for the most part. And they chose the Xbox Kinect as their video game mode of intervention, and the games focused on working on balance and coordination and dynamic body movements. And these are the games they chose that were fun. They did 2 weeks of training in a lab first, followed by 6 weeks of training at home. These are just an example of what the games looked like. So this is called the 20,000 leaks. So this is weight shifting and reaching and stepping. And again, this is something that not everybody would be safe to do. So if you were to try this, it would probably be wise to do this with the PT initially and or having a family member standing by you. Okay. And the next game is called the Light Race, and this was more of a stepping game. And this is the Xbox Kinect, but there are other video games out there that you could use in the place for Xbox Kinect. And actually, Xbox Kinect is no longer being manufactured, but there are many available probably on eBay or things like that. And then the next game was table tennis. So with this study, one of the outcome measures was the SARA scale, which we learned is a very commonly used clinical neurological measure. And if you are getting better, your SARA score will be less. And so these patients noticed 2 points on average improvement in their SARA score. And what is known about ataxia is that SARA score can worsen at a rate of 0.4 to 2 per year. So these kids were gaining 2 years, or a year of function just by doing this exercise on a regular basis. The more time the kids spent doing the video games, the more change they observed in the SARA score. And part of the study included hooking them up to motion sensors and looking at their quality of walking. And those measures improved. And then in those measures, they looked at postural sway, and they looked at how variable their steps were, and the amount of sway got less at a significant level of significance, and their ability to place their feet also was less variable at a level of significance. Then they looked at another outcome where they had people standing and have to deliberately step onto an X marked onto the floor, and their ability to do that was less variable also. And then they correlated the motion analysis measurements with clinical outcome measures, so the SARA score, and then a common score we use in physical therapy called the dynamic gait index. Oops, am I like on the right slide?
I think you're running for that one, right?
Okay. All right, yes, we're on the right one. So the dynamic gait index score improved, which is their ability to walk with head turns, body turns, step over an object, go up and down steps. The star there indicates that improved to a level of significance. People's reported level of confidence with walking trended towards improvement also, not to a level of significance, and these all corresponded with the qualitative gait measures. And their game scores improved. So it's just kind of neat that doing a fun, mode of intervention can be very effective in improving quality of walking. It's fun and it's not all that expensive too. Thank you. Oops. So we're going to go back to the Jeopardy home.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. All right, we'll take safety for 200, Alex.
Does anyone know what these are? Foam rollers. Go ahead.
We don't have an answer there.
What's that?
We don't have a click on the answer.
You just go to the next slide. You can click it.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so foam rollers. So these are kind of fun because you can put these on the floor. You can lie on top of them, so the roll goes between your head and your hips, and you can work on postural control. Just laying on it, not doing anything in itself is an exercise with your hands not touching the floor. If you roll off of it and you lay on the floor, that's not a big deal. It's pretty safe, but yet it is one of those tasks that can set you up for success with walking. They come available in a full round or a half round, so the half round could be a little easier way to start off progressing to the full round. The half round's kind of fun too because you can stand on it in the corner of a room, either on the flat side or the round side. But that would be probably best tried out with the help of a PT first, or with somebody standing by you at home in the corner.
If we can go back. Oh, great, thanks.
Safety for 400, Alex.
So does anyone know why our lab mate is standing in the corner? Very good. So the answer is that using a corner is actually a simple and easy means to be able to have support for your balance, especially since people tend to fall backwards. If you can position yourself so that you're just far enough away that you don't have to touch the wall to perform any activities, you can always put a walker in front of you or a chair so that you also have something in front to give you support as you need it. But it gives you an easy at-home way to be a little bit safer trying something new. All right.
And we'll take safety for 600, Alex.
Does anyone know what you might use this scale for? The answer is it's a way in order for you to make sure that you are making your exercise as challenging as possible or at the appropriate level so that it's not too hard. If you can just click to the next slide, Jen. In a study that I did in our lab, we looked at balance exercises for people with ataxia. They went home and did exercises 4 times a week for 6 weeks. And for every exercise, they rated how hard it was. And that's the one significant finding that we had from the study in particular, was that it was your challenge level that was most important as to whether or not you could see improvement in your balance and then also in your walking. You really want to find that perfect medium. You don't want it to be too easy, or you won't see improvement. You also don't want it to be too hard, or you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to learn something. So if I am picking up my leg, but I have to put it down right away every time, I don't have enough time to be learning that task. Or if I practice standing on one leg and the whole time I hold on to something, I'm not really working to do that myself either. So finding that middle range is really key. And using a scale like this is one way to do that for balance, or it's actually originally used for looking at your cardiovascular effort while you're walking or running or biking, something like that. So you also can use it as a way to be sure that you're safe. And you can tell that if your rating goes down, that maybe that's the time to start making the heart exercise a little bit more difficult as you're showing improvement. So.
We'll take safety for 800, Alex.
And does anybody know what one of these is? That's a walker. So I particularly like a walker like this one that's shown here. And if you move on to the next slide, you can see there's a few choices. I haven't seen too many of them around. Typically, you see them more with children, but they are available for adults. They're typically more called as a gait trainer than a walker. But what they do is they actually come from behind so that you hold on to the rails and and the walker comes up behind you. The nice thing about that, particularly for people with ataxia, is that your stepping is not coordinated and not always in the same place. So now there's nothing for you to worry about kicking as you're going. The other thing is you can set it so that it doesn't roll backwards, and so that can be a nice feature if you're going up to something and you need to just stop and be able to use your hands. But it can also prevent you from falling backwards in that way. So it's just something to consider. We've seen a lot. Jen and I guess we scope out equipment when we're at a conference like this. So we've seen quite a few nitro. So I think it might be a popular item. And I've seen a few of the U-step walkers. They were designed particularly for Parkinson's disease because they have a laser light that can shine on the floor. But one feature of that is that you can set the tension on the wheels so that it might be stronger so that it won't roll away from you as quickly. So that might be another reason to consider something like that. It's also a little bit heavier. If we'll go back. Yes.
Do you know of any walkers that have brakes similar to what's like with a bicycle that would squeeze the wheels? My wife's got one that goes downhill. If you turn on the brake, it stops dead.
That's the U-step walker.
You almost fall over. Do they make them that you can slow down?
So the question is, are there brakes on walkers that rather than just lock, they actually will allow you to brake like you do on a bicycle with handles? And there are a couple out there that are available, and I'd be happy to. I don't know them off the top of my head. You were saying the U-step walker does that? It may actually allow you to do that. But I know there are a couple others. So if you want to look for me this afternoon, I'm happy to find those.
We're going to go to Final Jeopardy, Alex, which is, I think, slide number 60.
Oh, you could, sorry. Go on to that eye on the first screen if you can go back to home. Sorry.
There we go.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So what are some key exercises for people living with ataxia? Balance training, 20 minutes, 4 times per week at an intense enough level to be challenged, yet not place oneself at risk for falling is recommended. And in the exercise study done by Jen Keller, who's right here, most participants in her study performed the exercises in standing, yet those who were unable to stand safely performed the exercises in sitting instead and still achieved benefit. And those who exercised every day in her study, yet not at the level that was challenging, did not benefit as well as those who exercised every other day, but at a little higher level of intensity within their safe ability. So, as we pointed out earlier, using a corner of a room would be a good, safe place to do your balance exercises at home. Coordination exercises may include arm or leg placement tasks, stepping to a target, reaching tasks. And as we talked about, using the video games with a safe setup can effectively improve quality of walking. And endurance exercises are important, as Jen said. It takes people living with ataxia much more effort to walk from point A to point B. Amy Bastian published a study concluding that heart rate of people living with ataxia increases with walking more so than people without ataxia. So exercising on a recumbent stationary bike, treadmill, elliptical, or in a pool will help achieve cardiovascular endurance and prevent fatigue from being a limitation to your function. And we also learned today from Chang's bicycle study that cycling can improve functional coordination of the leg muscles and the clinical neurological outcomes. So the question is, what kind of balance exercises do we recommend? We recommend you do sign up for a physical therapist to kind of assess your level of ability. We want everybody to work within your limits, but you want to stretch those limits but be safe. So for those people who can stand, we do recommend standing in the corner, maybe starting with your feet apart, and then gradually, 1 inch at a time, bring your feet a little bit closer. Try it for the time you can, maybe a 30-second goal, and work up in 15-second increments up to 2 minutes. Just plain standing in the corner in itself is a very effective exercise. It can help you be set up for walking. If you can't stand, you're not going to be able to walk. So balance is very much a prerequisite to be successful at walking. Alternatively, if you can't stand, working on sitting tasks is also very valuable at the edge of the bed or on the foam roller or on all hands and knees. Again, with the help of a physical therapist, you can kind of determine what is the appropriate balance home program for you to do it that's safe but doable. What is the typical exercise that a physical therapist would want you to be engaged in? So again, based on the evidence in the literature, the key exercises are balance training. These coordination tasks, we're talking about it right now, so I'll keep going here. And then if you have any additional questions, you can find Jen or I after the presentation.
Maybe I can just add a couple things. So in our study, we actually, everyone actually did 3 balance exercises in sitting and 3 of them in standing. And the goal was to have one at either end, one that was too easy and one that was sort of too hard, so that you always kind of knew that you were working in the right range, and you start with the easiest and work towards the hardest. I think things you have to think about are like when you do them during the day, it may be more difficult at the end of the day when you're fatigued than in the morning, so you may have a different variety of things you can do. I think we didn't find that people had to do them, like Jen said, every single day, but that you kind of actually needed to put in a good effort at doing them. I usually start people with just being able to sit still or stand with as much stillness as possible. So, sway is increased. So normally everybody stands and they have a little bit of sway in their standing, but it's usually greater and you have some ataxia. And so just trying to, as Jen said, if you kind of work on bringing your feet together, but you can still maintain that static stillness that you have when your feet are farther apart, that would be sort of the general idea. And then you progress that to something that we would consider dynamic. So turning your head, reaching with your arm, doing something like that, starting to shift your weight onto one leg or the other, shift your weight from side to side. I really like Jen's exercises on the foam roll, because if you have trouble with your balance in sitting or standing, you actually start on the floor. So, you don't have to worry about falling or losing your balance. But I do think that it's really key to have someone who can help you. That is one issue, I think, in our study, is that people who lived alone and felt unsafe really weren't able to challenge their balance. And so that might be the time that you really need to find a partner or come to a clinic to be able to find that thing that works best for you. Okay. Yeah.
Have there been any studies involving yoga was the question. I don't think any studies specifically looked at yoga, but yoga falls under the category of a lot of what exercises have been proven to be helpful in ataxia. So balance, endurance, coordination, strength. So yoga is a very, very helpful adjunct to the standard exercises you might be recommended by a PT. In fact, it's nice because it's in a group setting and it's, something you've signed up for. It might be fun and social, so that's definitely a great resource to tap into. And sometimes if you were to go to a group yoga class, the instructor might be asking you to do things that are just not realistic for you to do. So you have to be mentally okay to modify whatever they're asking you to do to maintain your level of safety and ensure you're not setting yourself up for disaster. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So someone else is suggesting Tai Chi, and indeed, that's a great adjunct therapy to standard therapy for sure. And just to expand to what Jen said as far as other corner exercises, alternating tapping your toe onto a little box or a station or a cup without crushing it could be a task, or standing with one foot overlapped with another. As Jen said, turning your head while looking at a target, or squatting. Those are things that people can do, but again, that's not appropriate for everybody, but those are just some general ideas. Yeah.
Do you want to? I think we might be taking a lot of time, so maybe
we have 3 minutes left on our
do you
clock here, so I'm just going to finish this, and if we have any other time for questions, we'll take questions. Okay. So strength. A lot of PTs that you've worked with might have been recommending strength exercises, and that's not bad. Strength is typically not a primary issue with people living with ataxia. In fact, but people do commonly report to us PTs that my legs feel weak. But when we test their leg strength, their strength is more than adequate often. The weakness people describe is generally an issue with motor control. And in certain ataxias, those, as we might see with hemiplegic migraine, we might see one-sided weakness, but and then some people will see secondary muscle weakness from people just not being as active. So strength training is important, and we do encourage you to keep on moving within your safe level. And then typically, if you're stronger, your posture will naturally become more upright, and if you have good endurance, your posture will be more likely to stay upright for longer, and you'll be setting yourself up for successful walking. And then, I don't know how many people in this room have heard of gaze stability exercises. They are eye-head coordination tasks to improve the ability to see your surroundings clearly with head or body movement. And in people living with ataxia, the reflex connecting the balance mechanism, the cerebellum, and the eye movements may be impaired. And a symptom of this is one might experience difficulty reading street signs or recognizing people's faces as they approach you when you're walking. And in a clinical setting, a physical therapist with the knowledge of neurovestibular rehab can help to figure out if gaze stability is an issue. And a simple gaze stability exercise would be hold a Post-it note in your hand with an X on it or tape it onto the wall. And you would focus on the X while slowly turning your head side to side, keeping that X perfectly clear and in focus. And if it's blurry or moving, you would slow your head down. You would do this in sitting, and you could progress to standing, and you could first start off for 30 seconds and work up in 15-second increments up to 2 minutes. You could do this horizontal and vertical directions, and you could progress to a moving target. But this is another example of a task you could do to set yourself up for walking. Gaze stability exercises are not appropriate for people living with certain type of ataxias that can bring about involuntary eye movements, or such as with periodic alternating nystagmus. And this exercise actually might make people feel worse. So it's important to check with a PT or your physician before trying these exercises at home. All right. So where do we start when it comes to thinking about exercise? Definitely want to get a check with your physician and make sure you're safe to exercise. Consider signing yourself up for physical therapy if you haven't already to establish the right program for you. And definitely want to make sure you're setting yourself up to be safe and not for disaster. And then that would give you a whole bunch of other issues that you don't have time or patience to deal with. And you, as Jen said, we can't stress enough that it has to be effortful. You can be, my mother is super religious about doing her stretching every day, but it honestly isn't really, it's really important that you do tasks that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, but again, within your abilities, so you are safe. But for you to get that ultimate benefit, you need to make it effortful. And then what will make you help me stay motivated to exercise regularly? We talked about setting realistic goals and including modifying your expectations. So, for example, if you want to be able to walk a certain distance and you're only walking 100 steps per day on your pedometer, make a goal of 110 steps in the next week. We're not expecting that 10,000 steps per day or 5 miles per day, that doesn't apply to everybody. So you have to work with what your abilities are and then readjust those goals to make those realistic. And I think everyone in this room could probably say, for the most part, if once you do exercise and you do get started, you actually feel better. So that's incentive in itself to keep going. And then tap into available resources like technology, the video games, or using apps on your phone to track your walks, or recumbent bikes, the trike bikes for road biking, if there's kind of different ideas out there. Give yourself an incentive. Could be paying money to sign up for a gym membership. You feel guilty if you don't go, if you've paid for something, or sign up for PT. Get an exercise buddy, or reward yourself, with a ice cream cone or something like that after you've finished your exercise session. So in the Birds of the Feather groups, we hope that you take the chance to share with others what works for you in terms of exercise, or listen and learn from what others are doing and what works for them. So
if you could go to our acknowledgements, thank you slide, that'd be great. No, you can't.
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
So maybe he can thank.
One more slide.
Oh. Sorry. Well, we want to thank all of you for coming and for having us today, and particularly everyone who's participated in exercise studies to help facilitate more information about what rehab is able to do.
And then in your handouts is a little available reference section. So any of the studies that we talked about are available. And if people are interested, so thank you very much. You can give them to Lori.